Dobrý večer, vážené posluchačstvo. Protože jsem byl ve správný moment na správném místě, tak jsem byl pověřen panem profesorem Hulcem, abych ho zastoupil, protože se roznemohl a rád uvedu naši kolegyni a přítelkyni z Polska, z Wroclavy, Elżbietu Komarzyńsky.
Perfect.
Trošku těžký jméno, s její senzační přednáškou Život pod mostem. Myslím si, že pro architekty je to obzvláště aktuální téma, jak řekli naši studenti před chvilkou. Může se nám to stát každému, ale teď dost s legrací. Já jsem slyšel Elžběty před 14 dny přednášku a byla to jedna z nejlepších přednášek, co jsem za dlouhou dobu slyšel, takže se velice těším na dnešní pokračování. So, Elżbieta, welcome, and it's yours. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you for such a nice introduction. It's a great pleasure to be a guest lecturer here today. And I'm really passionate to share my research with you, but also partly my design and also some kind of legislative struggles I'm part of also. And this is all about life under the bridge, from leftover underspaces to urban laboratories. And I thought, okay, we will start this lecture quite late. It's evening, almost winter evening. You're supposed to be maybe at home or in the bar. So I thought, yeah, let's just start with Beyoncé. And this is Beyoncé with her ladies dancing and singing. But where is it happening? Yeah, it's happening under one of many overpasses in America. But it also could happen in these kind of spaces in Europe. And this is just an example of many activities which could happen there, but also which are happening many times. And most of them are bottom-ups. And this is exactly what let's say, the essence of the lecture. Like, first of all, we will observe what is happening under elevated infrastructure. So what I mean by that, not only bridges, but also flyovers and viaducts, overpasses. And I mean here also road and railway infrastructure, and what is the process behind this activization of the spaces. And I have pleasure here to be for 1 month. This is my last week in Prague, and the research stay is funded by Nawa Zawadzka. And it's just, let's say, we are in the middle of an international project where we are also, I have a partner from this faculty, and we are working internationally on the research which is focusing mostly on legislative and planning issues concerning these special kind of spaces. But this is still going on, so I just want to reveal that I'm here also because of that topic. But today I will share with you the previous research stages. So it's not only Beyoncé who is using that space. You can recall also some nice movies or video clips where this special kind of space exists and is a big part of a scenes. So like Home Alone 2 in New York, or a stage designed to Blur's concert in Hyde Park, or also quite famous scene from Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio. Exactly the same space was also used in The Last Tango in Paris. If you can recall, that's the older movie. So you see already that there are so many, that these spaces are present quite often in movies, in music clips. So we could say that the producers and the photographers noticed its unique quality and its unique semi-enclosure space, which could be a frame for different kinds of activities. But it's not only professionals and artists who are using it, it's also common people. And you see that sometimes the space, just as it is enough. So we don't need to actually introduce so many things underneath it. People are just bringing their stuff and doing some things. And the things they get from the space is the roof. For example, protecting them from rain or sun. Or wind sometimes, and so on, and also it brings this quality of an enclosure. Also, it reminds us the arched pathways, which are also very common in ground floors of the heritage buildings. And also other scene like that, with the dancers dancing underneath the underspace is quite unique. And in this scene, actually, it's important that they use not only the space, but also a unique acoustics of that space for this kind of bottom-up performance. And this is the photo shoot I did. Just, while doing my research, I noticed some young people doing just spontaneously, or let's say planned, but really like easygoing photo shoots of themselves underneath the viaduct, and they chose that space on purpose. So that is, let's say, the first message I wanted to start with, that there is already some unique quality provided by these kind of spaces. And some people, like artists or common people, already observe that and use that for their own agenda. But there is another thing I want to also put emphasis on, and this is the pattern of the cities we live in. So the question is whether the Rome, as it was drawn by Nolli in 1748, is the same Rome city we have today. And I suppose it's not, because all that white space, which was indication of public spaces, and you can see there are streets, plazas, but also the interiors of the public buildings. I would say if the Nolli would draw this map today, the white space wouldn't be, there wouldn't be so much white space anymore, because it's overtaken by traffic. And we are like, really, we are not anymore on the streets. We are closer to the walls of the buildings and so on, and that changed totally the way we use our cities, and also that limited tremendously the percent of public and open space we can have within our cities. So maybe we should look for extra open space, which we didn't consider before, in order to get something which we are missing within certain area. So, so exactly this is also a question about so-called leftover after planning spaces. So spaces which were not considered while the urban development plans were drawn or think through. And the question is whether we have right now the chance for reclamation of that spaces. And what I mean by spaces left over after planning is especially, spaces underneath elevated infrastructure, because let's think right now about the map. We usually look at the city, Google Maps or urban development plans. The way we look at it is from the top. So the road or the railway is the only visible element. We don't actually see in these maps what is underneath. And the sad thing is that urban development planners exactly look, in most situations, they look at the city exactly in the same way. They look only at the 2D image of that, and in most situations, this is the result of my research, they omit totally to introduce this function underneath elevated infrastructure. So sometimes the limit, which will, let's say, with which we cannot really do so much with the space, is because under urban development plan doesn't predict that. Another thing is ownership, but we will get back to that. But this is the crucial starting point, whether we have right now the chance, but this starts from the very beginning, from an urban development plan, and whether we use that chance to do something with the spaces left over after planning. And some of them are exactly, the spaces which are, let's say, the main theme today. And this is really tremendous example what happened in our cities. This is Chorzów in Poland, and you can compare these two maps. This is the main square of the city. In 1966, it looked like that. But few years afterwards, you can see that they built the elevated infrastructure. And it's just crossing it in the middle of it. It's really like, sometimes you cannot really believe that this kind of decision was taken. And the thing is that it still looks like that. So the question is, I'm not here to be advocate, like, I don't want to say, let's keep it and let's use the space because it's so unique. I'm telling you that I want to say that you know, as long as this elevated infrastructure is there, we cannot ignore this the relations. We have to use it somehow in our favor. That's for example, that's the message I want to propose here. So of course, maybe there will be time it will be demolished, but if not today, if not in 5 or 10 years, we need to think through what to do about that space. And right now I want to just pause for a moment, just to indicate what I mean by underspaces or under-bridge spaces, because there's actually no, let's say, literature definition of that. And this is the area located not only under bridges, but also under any kind of elevated infrastructure with traffic or with railways, so viaducts, flyovers, overpasses, and of course, these historic arched viaducts as well. So this includes both scenarios, like heritage structures, like this one, of course, you know it from Prague, but also these kind of structures, which are, heavy concrete, and they are kind of separated also aesthetically from the city. But the question is whether we will leave it as it is, or maybe we will do something about that. And the topic is so significant because if you think really carefully, you will notice that there are quite many spaces like that within our cities. And sometimes they're really, that's really shocking how they are located. For example, this is the example from Zurich, where the elevated infrastructure is elevated above the river. So it changes the whole ecosystem. And again, I'm not telling you that this is the right way, but as long as it's there, maybe we could do something about that. Yeah, and also I think it's important to say that previously in the past, the infrastructure elements were designed in a different way. They provided some details. The materials were, let's say, were corresponding with the current trends in architecture. So they were like pieces of architecture, and the concrete heavy era of designing structure, especially within our city centers, I mean, that started something totally different. Once I had a seminar like that with the team of construction structure designers, and they were like looking at me, what are you talking about? It's you know, it's the way we work. We shouldn't, treat these structures in any different way. And I was trying to convince them that the spans they provide, they propose, or the height, and also the details, especially the one visible from the perspective of the pedestrians, are really crucial. It's not, it's not only a matter of calculations, but it's a matter of how people would feel within that spaces, whether this is comfortable, safe, it's light, it's providing a kind of reasonable space to be used. And also, underspaces in cities usually are degraded and isolated exactly because of that philosophy. They are underdeveloped and used mostly for parking or technical functions. And it's not necessarily because they were planned to be like that, but it was like the only option somebody thought at the end of the process. And also they're kind of invisible from the process of urban planning. And also because pedestrians usually don't feel well within that spaces, they treat them as physical and psychological barriers. But on the other hand, we have also a current states and trends within planning of our contemporary cities. And this is the time when the transport routes, especially railway routes, are modernized. So this is the moment where we decide which structures will stay, which will be demolished, and when they will be demolished, and also which of them also will be expanded. And I mean extended. And I mean especially here railway. Railway will stay with us. Some of the traffic flyovers will disappear. But railway is a long-term investment, which we have to assume that it will expand within our cities. And also, as I mentioned before, postponing the demolition also is the time it was given for us to do maybe some low-budget temporary solutions for that spaces. And of course, now is also the time when we think finally about the compact and sustainable cities, about mixed use of our areas in cities, and also, of course, we have a crisis of traditional public space, which is gradually being commercialized. So there is even bigger lack of public space, or like public space open for interpretation of the pedestrians and inhabitants of our cities. And answer for that, I mean, one of many, but one of many answers could be located underneath elevated infrastructure. And this is totally not a new notion, I have to say, yeah? Because let's have a look here. This is the scene from Berlin, 1920s, and you can see that the structure was designed as a piece of architecture. It was designed like to properly, you know, be working, yeah, aesthetically, to let's say, to respond to the surroundings and so on. And also the spaces underneath the railway viaduct were designed with a certain purpose. So it's a totally new notion, but in a way we lost it. Yeah, we lost this kind of strategy. And I don't mean that we need to design exactly the same way new structures, but it's just a matter that we need to look back, like what could be done in different way, and if there are some lessons learned from the past. So let's go back to this. Yeah, that's a space under A8 flyover in Kohandel-Zaan in the Netherlands before adaptation. And then you can see, let's say, the main strategy behind adapting it, and then the final result. Yeah, so this, sometimes you don't need to do much. I mean, and also you need to observe what is already happening within that space, and then the people will come, or let's say they will stay longer. Just few words about me, because I want to indicate that the research I'm sharing here with you is quite already, I mean, it lasts quite long. It all started with the master thesis, which was exactly about that. It was about adaptive reuse of the bridge, which was no more in use, but also I introduced some kind of skate park under the bridge and so on. So there was this, let's say, this personal observation and passion, which was a seed for further research. And then afterwards, of course, I did my PhD thesis on adaptive reuse of post-transport infrastructure. And afterwards, I got some feedback during my PhD thesis, but remember, it was a few years back, that some people were saying, yeah, that's interesting, but you know, that's not really trendy now, that's a kind of a niche topic, and so on. And right now, I'm very satisfied because nowadays, you know, when we are talking so much more about sustainability within our cities, about compact cities, 15-minute cities, and you know, like we treat the spaces with so much more effort, then finally the topic is like, let's say, more popular, and there are like NGOs and municipality asking me to, you know, to provide their consultation on expertise on these kind of spaces. So sometimes it's just, you know, there's a message for you that sometimes the research topic is right, but it's just the timing is not. So sometimes you just need to wait. So I'm really happy to, you know, to be helpful and supportive to some organizations who are struggling to introduce this kind of investments. And many things happen on the way. Also, I noticed I provided some expertise, for example, for the municipality of Krakow. We suggested within the team some kind of solutions, and then the final result is quite different, but I will share that with you at the end. It will be the last example. And also, yeah, here is the most, let's say, recent thing as well, the international research I mentioned before, and also establishment of the Upcycle City Lab, focusing on research and design collective. Yeah, so let's have a look how these underspaces look like, what are the initial conditions and strategies towards integration. what is wrong with them also? What are the superstitions we have against them? Yeah, usually we say, okay, it's dark, it's dangerous, I don't want to stay there, I don't want to go there, it's smelly, or all kinds of things. And in a way, it's true. But important thing to say is whether it is like that because it's neglected, or it's because it has to be like that all the time. And yeah, it's mostly it's neglected. It's a matter of being neglected, that there is no management of that space. There is hardly any light provided. So like really basic stuff are not working there. So sometimes you don't need a fancy design to make the space feel more comfortable and safe. It's just some basic solutions you need to provide to start people staying there for longer. And of course, the stages of, let's say, investigating how the space works starts with urban analysis and also indicating whether the space has potential. Because, of course, it's necessary to say that sometimes these spaces are located very poorly. Like, for example, they are in the middle of crossroads, and there's hardly any connection for pedestrians to come. So they are in a way lost, you know. They are they will be neglected and they will be isolated. So of course that's not a potential for future adaptive reuse projects. And of course surroundings and traffic flow analysis is really crucial here. And then we go to safety, lighting conditions, vibroacoustic climate, level of air pollution, and all that. I don't want to, tell you much detail about that research, but the general result was that the deck of the elevated infrastructure works as a kind of umbrella, and it protects us somehow. Yeah, of course, not only from sun or from rain, but also in terms of acoustics. As long as there are no holes in it, it protects us from the loud noise from the street. And also it protects us from the air pollution from the top and so on. So sometimes the research showed that the conditions underneath are much better than in the space next to it. And that, I think, it's really important. And for that reason also in Berlin they were called Regenschirm, these spaces, because they were like, umbrellas. And of course, bridge structure is an important thing, because the different type of structure demands different solutions. Also, we need to treat differently the space. Also, the space disposition is different at the end, and so on. So all that also is important here. And of course, the thing I mentioned before: ownership, legal conditions, whether what kind of functions are assigned to that land, what are the forms of ownership and land management, and of course, whether there are some legal constraints at the design stage we need to face, like, for example, flood protection in case of bridges, structural safety of the bridge structure, because we need to remember that we are adding additional buildings or like spaces underneath, but still the structure has to stay safety, and we need to have technical access to it, and so on. And also we need to consider fire protection, because that's also quite a risky thing that we cannot really. We need to protect the heavy structure from the possible fire issues, and so on. So all this, of course, looks like a huge challenge. But again, from the research and also from case studies I investigated, the main message here is that as long as people are open to options and they can provide sufficient extra solutions, everything is possible. It's just a matter of being, ready to do something about it. So the regulations, I mean, at least in Polish law, they really allow that, and many examples from European cities also show that this is possible to do that, and also here, of course, in Czech Republic also. But sometimes there is a kind of a blockage with investment, and it's mostly because people don't cooperate, don't negotiate, and they just say, no, it's not possible, we will not go further with this proposal. So all that, of course, helped us to indicate strengths and weaknesses. And this is a kind of a framework which is like ready-made for each kind of space to be investigated before starting any kind of concept. And this is really important because, how to say it, it's like these spaces are really not well known. We are not familiar with the initial conditions of them. We are kind of afraid, set back, what actually the quality of the spaces and also the disposition and all that environmental issues and so on. So sometimes this is already enough, you know, to be scared and not to start doing anything. But there are actually solutions which are helpful and which we investigated within case study research. So of course, the things which are helpful are basic environmental solutions, functional programming, architectural form selection, which is also part of the process, and local community engagement. And I mentioned that the deck protects people somehow, but also the deck could be a platform of energy. And there are already solutions which are, you know, taking, of course, you can get the energy from the wind turbine, from the speed of the cars or railways and so on, of course, the solar panels and all that. So actually, the deck could be also a platform, a kind of a energy source. And also, it collects water, so it could also work as a source of the rain gardens and so on and so on. So this is also important because we have a kind of a huge deck which could collect so many things, sources of energy, sources of water, and so on. Of course, they have to be treated in a special way, but this is also a solution which can make these investments more sustainable. And now we will go to catalog of adapted underspaces. And here is the ones which were included in the research, but this was the 69 examples of underspaces like any kind of. Yes, some of them were still empty and abandoned, some of them were developed. And then the final selection was 60 examples of adapted underspaces, which were researched and listed in the catalog. And you can see, of course, that there is Prague, there is Wrocław, my city, yeah? And of course, there are so much more than these indicated in the maps. But finally, of course, I have chosen the ones which are like most representative, and also they are like they really indicate a kind of order of typology of these kind of spaces. So let's start with the functional programming. Let's have a look which programs are most popular within that spaces. And of course, commercial and services are 34% of that. Next, we have art and culture, sport and leisure, especially city sports like skate parks, mini golf, and all these, you know, youth sports which usually don't have special space within our cities. But sometimes also there were investments with office spaces, traveler services, and also there was one unique house, and it was the architect's house located in London, and I will show it to you later on. So we will start with a look at the commercial and service functions. So this is an example from Zurich. And of course, it could remind you Negrelli Viaduct from Prague, although there are some different dimensions. And also, important thing is that we have actually two viaducts which are, you know, here meeting like at this point. So there are like two railway lines meeting at the end. So architects provided here a market hall which is like just between the spaces. And here's another example of arched viaduct in Warsaw, in Poland. And it's again commercial functions in the shape of a department store. And here are all other examples. And I think it's important to put emphasis on that you see that there are all kinds of architectural forms, small scale, bigger scale, also some temporary solutions, some bigger, and also some investments which also somehow cover the infrastructure, like make it invisible, hide it. So you can see there is a wide selection, yeah, what to do with the space as it is. And also we have art and culture, and this is an example from Vienna, and this is a design by Tilner and Wieninger and Weile Export, and this is just a glazed cubic, which is a pavilion for any kind of artists. We are just guests here from time to time. Yeah, they are just changing the exposition from time to time, and this works just a focal point. Yeah, to people to have a look what is the current exhibition. And again, all kinds of scales and architectural forms of buildings, but also open-air galleries who are serving as art and culture spaces within underbridge areas. So you can see like small galleries. Also, sometimes the gallery is just an open-air passage, which is just by providing the light and also by providing some posters or pictures, already there is kind of new life brought into it. And this is also important thing that sometimes we don't need much, yeah, to make some change. For example, in London, they did a huge project. It was called The Light at the End of the Tunnel, and the whole project was about introducing artistic installations, but also comfortable lighting within the passages under railway. So it wasn't focusing on, you know, huge investments like buildings and longer spaces, but just the passages to make them kind of unique for pedestrians, but also comfortable and safe to pass through. And here's another example under arched viaduct, which is a unique skate park, but it's an enclosed space. This is actually kind of a building, yeah, with of course walls and doors. And it was possible to treat the space that way because the space was like actually combined from few viaducts. Yeah, it was really like a wider space. And also there was a nice play with, you know, with the shape of the arch underneath in the shape of the skate ramp. And here you can see all kinds of sport activities and also all kinds of usage of the space. And some of them are designed, and some of them are just, you know, people going into the space and doing something with it. And sometimes this is exactly the process. It starts with a bottom-up actions, like people gathering, having an idea, doing something illegally sometimes, yeah, that's true. And then maybe doing some crowdfunding, negotiating with the municipality and the management of the structure and so on. And gradually, sometimes it happens that something which was just a temporary action become a special kind of investment. Yeah, and I think when we talk about functional programming, it's really important to remember about the scale of the influence of these structures within our cities, especially when we have the longer ones, which are, for example, like 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer long, and they are crossing our cities. So they are, as I said before, physical and psychological barriers. Of course, there are some passages and so on, but of course, this relation is really strong. And I mean, that we treat them as barriers. But also, this long line meets different neighbors, builds different relations with the surroundings. So that's also important to say that the programs should be mixed, should respond to the current neighborhood and also to the current needs and so on. So the obvious solution, which mostly comes to mind of managers of that space, let's do parking spaces there. It's also for that reason not really good. Of course, with that investment, they introduce some parking spaces. You see this in the parking zone is with the blue color, indicated with the blue color. But all the rest are different functions. And they also were kind of a response. What is already happening there, what people need, and what is in the neighborhood. And the same here. The project I showed you before, but now you can have a look like from the top, that the functional program of that space was mixed. And not only in terms of what kind of services and shops were there, but the important thing is to say that they were not only commercial, but there were like also spaces for neighborhood gatherings, some NGOs, offices, and so on. So the kindergarten as well, and so on. So let's say the strategy here was to invite different kinds of stakeholders to be part of the dialogue of that space. And another mixed-use development, another huge one, which started actually in the 70s. It is a really famous one in Westway in London, and it all started with the people living next to it not being, really happy about this new structure being built and dividing neighborhood. But then at the end, gradually, what was like a bottom-up initiative right now is a self-served and, let's say, self-financed Westway Trust. Kind of a firm which is also providing spaces for rent and also the sport and gym center. But most of the time, it serves the neighborhood. And right now, let's have a look at architectural form selection. So we can see that also there are some stages of development that could be introduced within the spaces. So we can start with transformation only of the bridge structure elements. Sometimes it's only the transformation of the open space under bridge structure, only, for example, the pavement, the ground. And sometimes, of course, there are like big-scale developments, like real buildings. Yeah, not only kiosks, but like buildings which are like built over that structure. And this could be, of course, synthesized to these kind of drawings, showing that, for example, if we have, let's say, low budget, or, for example, we want to just test something, it's better to start small and then gradually maybe change it to more temporary, more permanent solutions and invest bigger money. So here are a few examples of that. So, for example, sometimes it's just the ground which is changed. And already this carpet, let's call it green carpet, provided in Bratislava, changed the perception of the space already, like showing the space where the bus drivers should be more careful, where's the space where people gather, and so on. And sometimes this is enough as a starting point. Sometimes the structure is really, let's say, not aesthetic, let's say, and we want to change it to something else. So sometimes the option is also to cover it with a totally new panels and bring the light into it and so on. Sometimes also the structure can disappear. And also sometimes we have the temporary solutions, like a kind of a test field, like kind of a acupuncture concepts, which are just coming there for some period of time, for example, only for summer festival, and this could come and go after some time. But this also provides some kind of a extras enclosure and a testing space, for people to use it. And then it could be moved to another place. So this could be also a kind of a testing tool for that spaces. But of course, again, we have also some, let's say, high-budget investments, and this is the one in Zurich, railway station revitalization, which partly was also combined of, treating the space underneath the flyover in a special color scheme to indicate where are the spaces for railway and where are the rest of the services and commercial facilities. And here you can have a look, like all these kind of architectural concepts which were realized in different locations. And I don't want to judge whether I like them or not. I think it's not about that. It's more about like looking, there are so many options, and people are, although you think that the space is limited, and we have to deal with the space as it is, and sometimes we are not happy with the structure as it is, or sometimes the structure is so great that we want to really put that in the first, let's say, as an actor on the stage, yeah? So all this kind of, let's say, selection gives us a wide choice of solutions. But also the scale and the money we put into it, we have a kind of a, you know, wide choice, whether we should start small or bigger, and so on. So this is also, I think, a kind of a promising message that you don't have to start big, you can start small and test. And process of reclamation of underspaces. So the main conclusions, let's say, from the research was indicating, let's say, the optimal process of reclamation of underspaces. And this is not the process that happens in all these kind of investments. It happens partly in them, or it stops somewhere like in between, and so on. And sometimes also the order of the phases was different. But this is, let's say, the optimal one, because, as I said before, first, we start with finding the space, of course, we look into it, we investigate the initial conditions, whether they are the right ones to start any kind of concept. But then we start with an idea, but this idea is not yet a basis for, you know, huge international competition or a huge trade, yeah, for architectural offices. No, it's too early for that, especially with this kind of spaces. It's better to start working with local community, also observe what is already happening within that space. So treat the space as it is, investigate it, but also get people familiar with it. Because it's necessary to say that this kind of space is kind of like people are set back. They don't trust to come there, to stay there longer. It's not the space like the, let's say, I say school, and you know what I mean. I say house, and you know what I mean. These spaces, they don't have a kind of a, in the back of our head, there is no certainty what will happen there. People are not familiar with it, and they need to really get to know how it works, how they feel in it, and so on. So participation process and local community engagement, for that reason, is really essential. Let's postpone the investment and see how people interact within that space. And for that reason, also temporary projects happening in situ are really great solutions. And then, afterwards, project synthesis will happen. And this is the moment to maybe organize the international competition, or national competition, or just engage professionals to really propose something, but based on a previous survey, previous interviews, previous participation process. And then, of course, starts the executive planning and project implementation. But afterwards, of course, again, we need to manage the space, observe whether that works or not, and maybe sometimes we need to start from the beginning, in a way. Yeah. So let's say the sad, or let's say shocking thing is that it's not always like that. Sometimes, for example, international competition happened before getting to know the site, and they didn't do, any kind of analysis. They didn't know the initial conditions. They didn't organize the participation process, and there was a huge surprise that the winning concept was actually the one which people hated. I mean, in a way, hated. Of course, it looked brilliant, but it didn't meet the people's need, and also they didn't believe that it will work there, and so on. So yeah. And right now, I would like to share with you 3 representative case studies. And the first one would be the one which you've seen already. This is Market Hall under the viaduct, but now we will have a look into some details of it. And this is a nice story because it's the story of Arch Viaduct, which was never designed in a way that it was supposed to be a place for interiors, for buildings, and so on. It was always supposed to be open space. But it was like that because it was on the suburbs of Zurich, yeah? It was like really in an industrial area, not really, let's say, welcome to people to stay longer and so on. But after some time, of course, industry left that space, and some art and craftsmen people came, and they had an idea that it's better to use that arches. And that was the moment that the city organized the international competition, and the winner was EM2 and Architekten from Zurich. And important part of the winning concept was that apart from building the single buildings within the arches, they also introduced this huge market hall in between the two viaducts. So you can see here and compare and contrast, yeah, with what was the initial state and what was the final design. And the important thing is also here that the solution provided at the end wasn't that each arch had to be built with, you know, there had to be building within the arch. Some of the arches were left as they are, you know, open as an open interiors and so on. So they were also left open for interpretation for the future. And also there is a nice play with the light and colors, but also it represents somehow the mixed use of the whole development. Here you can see the details of the investments in a moment, yeah, and also some, yeah, the spaces, this position. And also, of course, the crucial thing was to protect the heritage arch viaduct, so not change the faces of it, to restore it, but also very crucial thing was the vibroacoustics analysis and also the result of it. So at the end, the new buildings were acoustically separated from the arch structure. And another case is just to, you know, to give you a contrast in comparison to the previous one. This is a temporary structure also in Zurich, designed by Alice, a group from EPFL University, and this is located under the overpass at Tony Arial next to art school. And this was just a temporary, I think it lasted 3 months or something like that. And it was a huge, it was a pity because actually students really enjoyed that structure. But yeah, that was, let's say, that was the idea, that was the agreement, that it had to stay temporary. So I also took pictures like it looked now, and I have pictures how it looked when the structure was there. So I think also another observation is that students still use that space, although of course they don't have these enclosures and they cannot provide such an amazing gatherings and so on. But somehow they feel already very good there. For example, they play with the football there or do some sport activities. And this is the temporary structure provided by the student of architecture from EPFL. And it's nice also noted that because they used exactly the same pieces of wood also in another installation further. And so that was like also movable and recycled. Yeah, so here you can see a few views how the structure was also, it was partly also the art installation, but it was partly also a really functional object for all kinds of purposes, for example, storing the bikes and so on. And of course, in terms of aesthetics, the strategy was here to contrast the heavy concrete with something which is wood and has a human scale. And of course, it's easy and fast to build by students themselves. And the last case study is the one from Krakow in Poland. And it started with the huge international competition live between flyovers. And right now is a railway park, and only 1/3 of the whole length of the space is provided with this park. So let's say this is a story also that sometimes you plan to do a huge investment, and you organize the competition, with that, let's say, with that concept in mind, but at the end, it finishes in different way. So just to give you an overlook, where is it located? Yeah, this is the main square, and this is another popular touristic attraction. So it's just in between these two spaces. And here the story is a bit different because the structure was built new one. It wasn't the existing structure. The existing structure were actually this made of ground, let's say the hills, yeah, with grass and greenery. So quite pleasant to look at from the windows of these buildings. But there was a demand to extend the railway, to add additional track. So they changed the embankments into the flyover. And you see how heavy the structure is, how huge are the pillars, and so on. And of course, we can ask ourselves whether this was the only option. And this is exactly the case where the structural perspective was the one which was, you know, the only reason they built it the way they did. There was no consultations, no investigation whether, for example, the spans, the height, the sizes of the pillars should be different in any way. They didn't think about the human scale of the structure. So this is the example where, you know, when sometimes architects are not involved, urban planners are not involved, landscape architects are not there to serve and to, you know, to take part in the process. So let's say the sad thing was that the competition and the moment they asked architects to propose something, what was again the moment where the structure was already there. I mean, it was being built, but let's say it was already decided how it look like. Although we had the chance to do it differently. And again, I want to put emphasis that it could happen soon in different parts of our cities. That there will be a chance, I mean, there will be a demand to extend the railway, railway tracks, to add new ones, to expand the structure. And yeah, the thing is whether we use that chance, yeah, and to, let's say, put some influence with how this structure should be designed. So you can see here how they give an extension to existing structures. So of course, the end result was also that the structure was going to be closer to windows and to the streets and so on. So that was also kind of a struggle within that discussion. So they organized the competition, and that was, let's say, the starting point for the architects participating in that competition. So there are a few sections indicating like how wide or how high is the structure. There was also part which was left as an embankment, yeah, here. But then the whole, the long, really route was still in the shape of an open structure underneath flyover. Yeah, and the process was long because municipality was also negotiating with the railway to rent the space, because of course the managers of the space was the railway. But it was, you know, just, let's say, very important part of that the municipality was really, like, let's say, really at the last moment the stakeholder of the space. And this is the winning proposal, which again I have to share that with you, that before giving the competition brief to the architects, they haven't done any participation process, any analysis of the existing conditions. I mean, at least of course they provided, for example, the drawings and so on, but there was no in detail investigation of the, you know, initial state and conditions. So the winning proposal was really, like, you know, really interesting project proposed by the Dutch office. And the idea was that the whole elevated railway will be also covered with the roof, green carpet, you could say. There will be also walls hiding the whole railway, so it would be like acoustic screens with some windows, and underneath there will be mostly commercial programs. And of course, there was also a kind of concept that also this railway will serve as a deck for tourists, to have a kind of a viewing deck for people to have a different perspective on the city, and this will complete the greenery ring around the city center. So that was the concept with the winning concept. So you can see how, let's say, how dense was the overbuilt space underneath, and also how covered was the structure and so on. And most of the people were, let's say, happy with it. I mean, at least when the discussion was within the architects' society. But then the neighborhood people who were living nearby and also were really, you know, had a really emotional relation with that investment, were so much afraid that this will overshadow the windows, that although it will protect them from the noise, it will not serve as a good addition. Also, that the main stakeholders of that space will be tourists and people using commercial program underneath, so not really people living nearby and so on. So there were so many, you know, debates, and also some people were really indicating that this is not the right solution. And here you can see some snapshots from the model. The model was also part of the competition entry. Yeah, and even though, I mean, they've chosen the winning concept, it also asked myself whether I could provide them with an expertise, which will not necessarily be to, you know, to judge whether this competition entry is better or not. They were asking more about how to investigate, you know, how the initial conditions and the proposed solutions, where they meet well. And that's exactly what we did. So we took all the competition entries, I mean, the ones which were like promising, and we treated them as scenarios. So not necessarily as a ready-made solution from the beginning to the end of the railway, but as a kind of sections, which, for example, this scenario B will happen, and this is scenario D will happen, and so on. And we also divided the space for that purpose. We divided the space into functional zones, which have a kind of unique characteristics. So we provided some kind of our individual zoning of that space in order to, let's say, find the best match between the zone and the solution proposed by the architects within the competition. And here are a few photo shots of the spaces you can see. So there were some sections where the neighborhood was, where the multifamily housing very close to the railway tracks. There were places where there is a huge market, open-air marketplace next to it, some greenery and so on. So there are all kinds of different zones representing different kind of initial conditions we need to consider it. And then we did the characteristics and assessment of design scenarios for the study area. So we didn't really, you know, we forgot about who did what. We are trying to look for certain scenarios within competition entries. And for that reason, we provided some kind of typology of solutions, and it was based on some criteria like transformation of space over or under the flyover, transformation of space only over the flyover or only under flyover, and so on, and also all different kinds of solutions, how it was provided, and what kind of functions were also proposed within that solution. So we can see some greenery underneath, parking spaces, that was also part of some competition entries. And also you can recognize here, for example, something which was similar to the competition entry, which was the one winning. And then we, let's say, again, did the match making. With the scenarios we indicated with the competition entries, we gave some examples from Europe and also other parts of the world, just to give let's say an overview how it could look like, what kind of solutions, and also if it was, let's say, if the data was enough, we also could provide like some details and also financial details about the certain investments. So this gave, let's say, kind of an extra data for the decision makers, whether this solution is right or not, and so on. And then we have written some characteristics of the certain solutions, giving the examples and also the explanation why this certain scenario is, let's say, the best, or let's say the most optimal one for the certain area, for the certain section of the investment. And this also was like, so there was, at the end, there was a kind of matchmaking between the certain sections with different characteristics and the solutions provided within the competition entries, but also with the detailed characteristic provided by us, by our team. So let's go back to the diagram. So I want to put emphasis here that actually Krakow case is not exactly, doesn't exactly follow that process. And this is kind of a lessons learned. Of course, sometimes also municipality struggles because it doesn't have a negotiating, I mean, not good position within the negotiation process with the railway or the road manager and so on. So that's also an issue. But would be good, of course, the optimal situation is when these relations are set and, let's say, defined before starting any kind of process, and also especially investing in any international competition or any kind of a trade and so on. Yeah. So yeah, the short summary of the research is that these spaces can be transformed and can improve the initial environmental conditions. There are many solutions who are supporting activation measures, and also we can start small with only functional activation, so only providing functions, starting doing something there. Sometimes it's enough as a starting point. But later on, of course, we can think of aesthetic activation, so like really thinking through what would be the optimal solution, what kind of architectural form we want to provide there, and also what kind of, and social activation is also many times the first one coming. But of course, the perfect situation would be to provide all of that, and then we have a complete picture of the space. So, of course, I would like to share with you some final conclusions which are more detailed. So, let's say the main conclusion here is that there should be included in this kind of definition, or especially terminology in architecture and construction, amendments in legal acts. Because as long as it's not there, I mean, included within the urban development process, or also technical conditions, regulations, and so on, there is like, we don't have common language. I mean, we architects, urban planners, landscape architects, and structural designers. There is no, let's say, common language, common platform to think about, because for now, most of the cases, there is a kind of a division between these two disciplines and branches. And of course, my postulate here is also to practice more gradual and multi-stage activation. So not really investing right away huge money and designing the whole space and being sure for many years that this is the only option, but more like testing it and observing what happens. And this will provide risk reduction for investments, and this temporary development will at the end, it will serve better the space, especially these kind of spaces. And the ownership is a really crucial thing, and this is something we investigate within our international research, because there are different examples. For example, Baurecht in Germany, and also special kind of solution in Switzerland and so on, which enables long-term lease. So in that way, it supports investments, investors who would be ready to put some money there, and also to, yeah, it makes just the process more sustainable. And they are like more willing to participate in it. And incorporating public-private partnerships is also really nice solutions, especially it happens in UK, because it includes participatory processes, and again, the gradual development gives the identity to the place and makes it, again, more sustainable. In terms of urban development plans, again, it would be good to have a practice which already gives us the option to assign separate purposes in local plans for existing overground transportation routes and the areas below them, because that's like only like, for example, in Poland, there are like maybe 2 master plans, which land development plans, which have that. And right now we are in the middle of the process of totally, new we call it general urban development plans, and it's happening all over Poland. And we already see that also there is this common strategy that the elevated route is only for traffic or railway, and there's, there are no additional options in addition. And of course, let's say the general starting point is to raise the standards of ongoing maintenance, like providing light, making the spaces cleaner, more safe, and so on. And sometimes also providing new function, like, for example, putting the kiosk there, also makes the space more safe, because people are present and people bring the safety into the space. And also the lighting and also the managing of the space, making it clean regularly, that also brings back kind of a feeling of a safety within that space. And we are so many times we forgot about that, essential, like basic solutions which are not there, and which could be, like a nice starting point to treat these spaces differently. So the question is whether we should go back to the past and have a kind of reflexive infrastructural urbanism era. Because right now, at the current stage, urban development is still determined by transport infrastructure, but it's not subordinated to it, like it was in modernism. Yeah? We already feel that we are not in modernism era, but also it's not dissociated from it, like it was in postmodernism. So we are like in the era of when we could treat infrastructural elements as part of our cities. And the question is, like, there are 2 things to consider: how we treat the existing infrastructural elements we have already in our cities, but also how we design each of them in the future. And just to give you a few examples, of course, Calatrava, yeah, we have motorway and bridge and control center in Nanterre, but also this is the example of the bridge with the built-in restaurant underneath it. So there are a few examples which have that, idea built in, that the structural element is also builds a relation with the city and with the pedestrians. So another question is, when should under-bridge space be designed? Whether, if you look at the timeline of life cycle of a bridge structure, whether should it be at the planning stage, construction stage, modernization, and then the question of demolition. Of course, sometimes we focus only on that, like we are just waiting for the structure to disappear from our cities. But sometimes this scenario never happens, or it will happen maybe in 5, 10, 15 years. So should we wait, or should we do something with the existing structure? And in terms of modernization, extending the existing traffic routes, railway routes, should we start planning them already, yeah, at the beginning, not only as you know, isolated pieces of construction. And that's just a kind of a extra, let's say, extra project we are working on. This is Green Chrobry, and this is another example of bridge, but it's not about underspace. Is the bridge which is not not anymore in use. They built a new structure next to it, and the one which is treated as a heritage it is left out. So we proposed within our Upcycle City Lab that this could be the space as a linear park, so that also the platform of people feeling, you know, cozy and safety, and also as a sustainable piece of our city. So, I mean, by showing that example, I wanted to indicate that, you know, I focus mostly in the presentation of spaces underneath elevated infrastructure, but also, of course, we can think about the space over it, next to it, and also whether all of the existing bridges and flyovers will be demolished, or maybe they could stay longer with us and be transformed to something else. So yeah, so I will leave you with that picture, and this is a space beneath the A12 motorway in London. And again, you can experience how the transformation happened, and it's also a temporary one, where the common local community provided some extra space during a summer festival, and it was a kind of a scale of the building which is all against the heavy concrete structure. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and yeah, maybe see you under the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Elżbieta. Very nice, very interesting again, very inspiring again lecture.
Thank you.
It's also space for your questions, if you have any.
I have a question. Yeah. Are you convinced or you're against all that?
Who's convinced?
Perfect.
Okay, I have a small...
there is?
Okay.
Question?
No, I wanted to say that I don't have the question, but I'm in the favor with all of this. It's very nice.
Thank you.
I would like to apply that someday.
Thank you. Nice to hear that.
I have one small question. You said you designed or you participated on one or more designs.
Yeah. I mean, but they were mostly concept designs.
But it has to be fun, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, mostly we do that with students, also within competitions. Yeah, that's interesting thing, that there are more and more competitions concerning these kind of spaces, international ones, and also the ones for professionals. So that also indicated me that, you know, the topic is becoming more popular, and again, people at last see the potential, yeah, and they don't want to, you know, ignore it anymore.
We also did some designs with the students.
Yeah, I saw in your foyer you have exhibition of some projects, and yeah, I noticed few of them. They were about that too.
Some questions? Okay. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening, everybody.
Yeah.
Zdraví pan profesor Hulec. A mějte se hezký večer a příště zase na přednášce.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.